Hello and welcome to The Mariner with me, Chris Stanmore Major. Well, in the last couple of episodes we've been looking at Hellcat and me getting her ready for her transatlantic run back to Nova Scotia. A big part of that's been looking at the mast and looking at the standing rigging and getting to grips with the fact that it's not connected to the mast via turnbuckles and clevis pins and those things we might be used to, but it's actually lashed in place. So lashings are an essential part of Open 60 and Volvo 60 and big performance boat offshore racing. Lashings are very light, they're very strong, they're easy to manipulate and change and alter. You can replace one very easily on your own. We don't need any special tools, but there's a particular way they need to be done. And as my story on Hellcat started to move forward and I went on to a few things about water ballast, a few of you wrote and said, hey, hang on, you haven't told us exactly how to do the lashing. No problem. And I do love that people are writing to me with questions, with comments, with feedback. We've had some wonderful technical feedback helping me to make better YouTube content and some wonderful questions which then give me ideas for what I can talk to you about. So, on the bench today, I've got this rig which I made up. We're back in Lunenburg now. It's a couple of months after the footage is being shot in France. It's -10 outside. It's much nicer to be in here than out on the deck of a boat. We've got this rig in place, we've got some Dyneema, and there's an opportunity to go through this in detail and share with you some tips and tricks that can make lashings something you may choose to use on your boat. Let's have a look at it on the bench. When we're working with lashings, the first thing we need to know is what is the distance between the 2 points that we're going to bring together, and what's the nature of the situation. Is this a piece of standing rigging, in which case stretch is going to be a big issue, or is this something where a little bit of flexibility is possible? If we've got something like a spinnaker halyard that wants to be secured at the top of the mast, it's a 2-to-1, it goes from the mast around a block on the spinnaker and back up inside the mast, we're not too worried about stretch, so Dyneema would be perfect. If we're doing something which is standing rigging, then we need to be more concerned about stretch over a period of time, so we'll be doing this with Vectram. But today we're going to imagine that this is something which we can do with Dyneema, that we're not worried about it. Running backstays can be done with Dyneema. It's not an issue because they're constantly in motion. They're constantly going to be retension, so it's not an issue. If there is a little bit of creep, it's not going to be a problem for you. Okay, so we take our line and we reeve it through. Now the thing to do with this is always bear in mind that if it's neat and tidy, it's probably going to end up with a better quality product at the end of it. We need to make sure that when we do the lashings, if we go from bottom to top on this side, that we go from top to bottom on this side. So the rope really is doing a nice continuous loop between the two eyes, and it's not going from bottom to top on this side and therefore creating an X. That X is going to give you a point where the lines are closer together. It's a small area where you can get some chafe. There's going to be huge loads on these, and it's worth bearing in mind that as you make this, you know, the line is very soft and supple in your hands, and what you're creating is nice and easy. Things move nice and easily, but once this starts to come under 10 or 20 tons, you know, that's 20 tons is 10 family cars. Like, there's a huge amount of load. Just normal operating loads of 10 tons is going to be 4 family cars. So this is going to go hard as rock. And what you've laid down here has got to be right so that it can transfer that load, it can hold that load for its entire lifetime and not fail because of something you've done. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? They're pretty nicely laid together. It's virtually impossible to make a pattern where these are all laying exactly parallel to each other. What's going to happen is as it comes under tension, they're going to bunch into two kind of vaguely cylindrical clumps of rope here. They're not going to stay laid flat. So don't try and over control the situation. Keep your energy on what's important. As long as they're laying side by side, there's going to be a little bit of gentle crossing, perhaps where some are mating with each other, but they all go in the top here, they all come out the bottom. They all go in the bottom here, they all come out the top. That's the major thing we've got to look for. Now we said that the braking strain of the PBO on this one is about 12 to 14 tons. What we've got now with 1 continuous loop, 2 continuous loops, 3 continuous loops, 4 continuous loops with a braking strain of 5 tons is we've got 20 ton strength here. So we're already into a safe zone and I've got a good amount of material that I can use to make the hitches at the end. With my rig here, I'm just going to put a little bit of tension to this, and although you don't always have to do this, it's good to see what it's like when you pull these things in. Dyneema is very slippery stuff, but as soon as you start trying to pull in the lashing and start trying to make things and settle things down, you start to realize that it might be slippery, but it's not. You can't just pull on it and it runs around like a little block and tackle. You've got to let everything bed in, you've got to settle everything down, and you've got to get things where they're going to end up. Now, the point here where the lark's foot is, it's good to get that if you can and get it underneath everything else. Through your aesthetics a little bit, for your protection, obviously a little bit of damage right there will let the whole thing go instantly. So we cover that up if we can. Now we get into how do we secure it. We're going to be securing it using hitches, which its most simple would be something like this. Now this method of just going round and round and round the rope is one which I see very often. It's I think it will hold, there's no problem at all. I see it where people go round and just keep going and going in this direction. What that's going to do is going to create a nice kind of spiral effect. It's a kind of senet, a kind of bit of decorative rope work. You can see how it's an overlapping pattern. We can use that for something called coxcombing and to create rope work which is functional in that it will stop abrasion in a particular area. But when it's used in this kind of lashing, what it wants to do, when this starts to pull, it's going to start twisting everything around. And it's going to find itself a lot of slack in here because this slot is all made on the diagonal and it will want to try and straighten it up. So another way of doing this would be to take the lashing and then go one way and then alternate and go the other way. What this will do is create a nice straight form of a hitching. It goes around the outside. That's going to secure your line, and it's all going to be in one row directly below the main point of pressure, and it's going to not release very much of its slack into the lashing itself. It's not going to change the length. Remember, on Hellcat, this method is used to create a tuning level in the rig because of the length between the vertical and its attachment point. If this changes length by a couple of millimeters on Hellcat, we actually change the tuning of the rig. This is pretty good. I like this method, and I see that in operation a lot, but I was taught a different method by Polish riggers. I learned this first working on Dama Jersey, which is a huge 3,000 ton Polish merchant naval training vessel, but then I also learnt it later on when I was working with Polish riggers working with Gutek in the 2010 Velux 5 Oceans race, and they were using it again on the back of their Volvo Open 60. So what we do, we've got our enough turns here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, to easily match what's going on, and we have an appropriate size line. I'd like to say, like, if this gap was a lot smaller, this rope wouldn't work so well. We're going to put hitches on here now, which are going to cover about 1/3 to 1/2 of the lashing, and that number of hitches should be enough to hold what's going on here. Well, not just should, it will be, but obviously you could fill it up, that'd be even more secure, but any less than that and you start to get into a point of like it may or may not hold the load that's in the lashing. What we have to bear in mind is that the first couple of wraps of this are taking most of the load, and then the next lashing laps that we put on, they're going to be taking some more of the load, and then the hitches are going to be taking the last little bit. There's not very much pressure in the hitches compared to the primary turns of the lashing, but there have to be enough hitches so that there's no way this starts to unwind itself. What I like to do with these is come down first and put a hitch around one side. You see how all of this lot is to do with things that go under and then over the top. This is like the bottom half of it here. We can take this and we can put ourselves a hitch around one side, like so. Okay. Now this is a piece of rope work theory which I've seen when we do abseil rigs in multi-pitch climbing, and we want to secure things away. We'll make anchors and we secure first to one side of it, okay? Then we take it and we secure on the other side of it. Now what I like about this kind of lashing method is that it starts to create a lashing where things aren't being drawn together. If it's being drawn together and it's got this kind of figure of figure of eight hourglass shape, you can see that when it's under tension, it's going to want to be trying to straighten itself up. It's going to want to be getting as straight in line as it possibly can do. And if you've got it pinched together in the middle, there's constantly an outward pressure from the lashing trying to slide the turns around on the hitches. Now, we put a couple hitches in here, and we've started off the process, but you can see there's kind of an ugly turn in this one here, and we want to avoid that kind of stuff. What you have to do is be very careful with the first turn that it comes around and buries itself into the lashing. It comes around and doesn't go back around the outside of what it's doing, but rather goes through the inside. And that's going to make it, firstly, line up exactly the same as all the other hitches you're going to do, but it means that there's a lot more gentle flow to the line, and that means it's not going to be a potential failure point. You see it comes in gently there. Okay, now we get this guy and we go around on the other side. We have to take everything and we have to snug it up against the top. We might want to evenly space them out and be kind of aesthetic about it, artisanal lashings. But the point is here that as soon as this lot starts to pull apart, this guy is going to want to snug everything up as tight as possible. So put it where it's going to end up. It's like having a cup of tea on a boat. You've got to put it as low as you possibly can, and you've got to put it in the place where it's going to end up if gravity takes control of it. And then nothing's going to happen that's unexpected. Okay, everything's snugged up against the end there. Now we get this guy and go around this way. And we just keep going around and around and around, making sure that we lay our line in. We've not got loads of twists in this one as it's going in. That is nice and tight on both sides. And we do this about a third of the way down our lashing. And if we've got a nicely proportioned line, we should end up with something that not only is secure, but looks pretty good as well. So let's just get on and get this finished now. Okay, well, while we're watching me just put these turns on here, we're going to go for about a third of the length of the lashing covered in hitches. I just want to say that this is my method of doing this, and it's one that's been shared with me by other professional riggers. It's one that I've used sailing around the world on boats with rigging which is secured in this method, and I can only say that my method leads to a lashing which is strong enough and secure enough. I've never had one break or let go or come undone. So I would love to hear from anybody who has more technical knowledge on this subject. I think that these things should be shared. We should all learn from each other. We're part of a sport which has 5,000 years of history, and anything we can learn from the past or from new materials and new techniques is something I'd like to hear about. Okay. By the time we get to this point, we're about a third of the way down the lashing. If we keep going, it looks very pretty. You know, there's no doubt that that's got a certain aesthetic to it, but it's not going to have any further function. The main load on the line is taken in the lashing itself. The primary load on the hitches is all dealt with up here. And then by the time we're getting down here, it's actually getting that there's almost no pressure whatsoever. So you're almost getting to a point where if it's getting moved around too much, it'll just fall apart. As it comes to the end now, what we'd want to do is put one more in here, but we're going to finish off with a knot. And if we put the knot in, the knot will be on the front of what we're doing. So the last one, instead of going through the way that we've been going, we dive it underneath and come through this way, meaning that the exit of our line is at the back. Okay? What I like to do with these now is take the end of it. The question most people ask me is, how do you finish this so it doesn't come undone? Well, there's actually very little load on it, so you have to put something in here that's going to stay done up on its own, is not going to come out, and is going to stop all of this lot unwinding itself. Now, you could take this and you could stitch it, and you could do a load of things, or get zip ties and hold it in. I've seen all that kind of stuff, but what normally holds very, very easily is take an overhand knot. It's the lightest knot there is. Look at it that way. Don't look at whether it's strong or not strong or anything else. It's the lightest knot there is, which means it can't build up momentum, so it can't shake itself apart very easily. We can tuck it right down inside that lot. Then we can take our rigging knife and we can cut through here, and we can have ourselves, you don't need any tape on it, anything. If any pressure comes on this, it'll just bed the knot in up against the back of here. It'll actually hide it a little bit more for you, and that'll hold no problem at all. Now, this kind of lashing This kind of lashing will easily hold the strain on the rest of this line. What we could do with this is that we know that Dyneema is very susceptible to sunlight, not as much as Vectran and PVO, but it is susceptible to it. So we could take rigging tape, or we could take a leather bootie, or we could put some kind of cover around the outside of this which is going to protect it from the sun. But I've got to say, I put lashings like this onto the backstays of a Volvo 60 in October of 2013, and whether we agree with the theory or not, the people that own that Volvo 60 still have the same lashings in place, and those Dyneema lashings are still holding up the rig, and we're now 6 years later on. I've just got this book here at the end. This is How to Sail Around the World by Hal Roth, and I love this book, and I remember getting this book and reading at the front of it that he had 50,000 miles of experience, and thinking, my God, I wonder if I'll ever sail that far. Well, that seems quite a long time ago now, but what's in here is great information. And he says that a mast of 50 to 60 feet typically has 20 wire end fittings, 4 spreaders, 2 sets, 30 turnbuckle parts, 4 spreader bases, 12 toggles, 8 spreader end pieces, 40 clevis pins, 8 running backstay parts, 26 mast tanks, 4 chain plates, 4 tang bolts, and 12 chain plate bolts. So we can very easily get the idea. There's a lot of components in a rig, and I don't know what that comes to, throwing my eyes over it, maybe 80 parts. I know that having estimated it for a Volvo 60, you're looking at about 150 parts in the rig, any one of which can fail. 50% of them, if they fail, it's game over for the mast. The thing with lashings is that you can, if you put them in instead of turnbuckles, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 parts, and we can replace it all with 1 part. And how many turnbuckles are on your rig? So have a look into it. It does require you to have fittings which can take lashings. This is rounded off, and we can see this big bail on this side has got very nice rounded edges. The lashings can't go through flat plate steel where a bolt would have gone previously, so some changes are required, but perhaps lashings is something that is useful for your boat. On Hellcat, it's a major part of the gig, and when we get into the next video, which is coming up just now, it's going to be about climbing the mast solo, going aloft up a 100-foot mast and changing all the lashings, and now you'll know what it is that I'm talking about. Alright, a bit quicker video this time. I'm told that the shorter videos are better. We're all aware of the fact that attention spans are reduced. I don't think they're reduced for sailors. I think if you're anything like me, you just want to eat up information, but we've all got busy days, so we'll start keeping the videos around 15 minutes, and you give me some feedback and see if that's any better. But for now, if you like the video, put the thumbs up, subscribe if you want, tell your friends, let's grow the channel, and then we can keep doing this and keep sharing this information and sharing our love of this fantastic sport. Cheers.